a name and moniker that Eric much maligned, for mostly good reason, was, you may remember it now, the compass points.
Oh, yeah.
Oh!
Yes. And the reason that brings me to the groups is it was originally going to be called GPS, right?
Yeah.
4 compass points.
That.
Remember, Garth, the north,
Yes,
finding
of course.
north?
Yeah.
And the 4
Still
compass
using
points.
that metaphor in talks.
Yes, 4 groups. So yes.
Oh my gosh, I ruined so many things, don't I? The compass points. Welcome to Psych Sessions, episode number 148. Eric here. By special arrangement with the Western Psychological Association, held in April 2022 in Portland, Oregon, Psych Sessions recorded select conference sessions and interviews. I had the grand opportunity to sit down with 2 dear friends and the faculty leadership of the American Psychological Association's Introductory Psychology Initiative, or IPI. Regan A. Gurung from Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, and Garth Neufeld from Cascadia College in Bothell, Washington. Please enjoy.
The Psych Sessions podcast is brought to you by Macmillan Learning Psychology. Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology, setting a whole new standard for integrating assessments, activities, and analytics into your teaching. One way Achieve does this is by offering exclusive digital activities for each title, created by the author or authors. These immersive activities, each accompanied by assessments, engage students in the very essence of contemporary psychology as they role-play as researcher, work with data, and learn to be critical thinkers. Experience these yourself and tell us what you think. See a preview and get involved at macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning. The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP, that is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter.
So, gentlemen, I've got you here. You're trapped in a dark room with no windows.
Well,
you don't know what
the
time
hotel
of
did
day it
actually
is.
lock off this part of the hotel.
We had to.
That's right. We had to break in.
We had to break in here. There are bars on the on the windows. We're not quite sure if this is an experiment or a study.
You know, there are a lot of parallels to this, where we are right now, and the Stanford prison study experiment.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe
we'll cycle back to that towards the end.
Yeah.
So, I IPI is how it's affectionately known, has been very productive over the past 3 years. The outputs that are emerging now. There is a book. There are handouts. I know it's going to be rolled out in conferences. It's been approved by council. Can you take our listeners back to the very beginning of the story, the origin story of how it got started, how you both got involved, and how you both became co-leaders of the effort?
Have we not talked about this on Psych Sessions? Because the 3 of us haven't been together in a couple of years then, right?
3 of us have never been together on a Psych Sessions episode.
Is that right?
That is pretty wild.
I've interviewed Regan twice, but you weren't there.
Oh, that's
You
right.
blew it off. You were
Not
you,
at
you
all.
thought
Not
it was
at all.
not
Different
important.
location.
No, but I mean, I guess we're just back in person now after a couple of years. And so where did IPI come from for you, Regan?
Well, it came from
you.
The
It came from
council.
you, I bet.
It came from the Committee on Associate and Baccalaureate Education.
Yeah.
One of the CABE meetings in DC, when the group was together, there was a lot of, at that point, we had already had, or AP had already had, the Strengthening Intro Psych Task Force that I was chair of. There was the assessment of Intro Psych that Maureen McCarthy was chair of. SNAP had happened. The high school summit had happened. And it became very clear that the intuitive next step was a full focus on Intro Psych.
For our listeners, Regan, can you tell them what SNAP was?
Yeah, the Summit on the National Assessment of Psychology held in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And that, just again, for our listeners who don't know you as well as we do, that's your former undergraduate institution.
That is where I was for a good 20 years. And a wonderful place that took on the effort and helped host.
And then did someone from CABE invite you to co-lead, or did someone from APA?
So
How did that happen?
one of the really neat things about CABE, both in its formation and in how it operated, was to always make sure that 2-year schools and 4-year schools were represented at the table. I mean, really, CABE in its title, it has that balance. And once I was on CABE at the time, a list of names of people who did a lot of work in intro psych was put together. And I remember the way it worked was a smaller group came up with potential co-chairs, and given my work on intro psych sitting at that table, it seemed to make good sense for me to be the 4-year co-chair. And the next step was a 2-year co-chair. And that's where Garth's name came up very much, and you alluded to this because of your work at SNAP. You had, shown your hard work and effort, and I think that your name was put on the table as a co-chair. That is my recollection of how, it started with these two names, you and me, and the next step was who would be good for the steering committee, because that was the first step.
I'm fine too. I understand that everybody has their imposter syndrome, and so I probably have less of it than other folks do, just because I'm naive. But I think in those kinds of situations, you think, how did my name get put into that hat or whatever? When I think about it, probably Tip Northwest was a deal as well, like starting a teaching conference specifically for intro psych, which was, if I trace that back, out of complete necessity to get a tenure track job. I was in a recurring 1-year position for like 7 years at Highline College with Sue France, and she, a great department there and stuff, but my position was like $39,500 a year for 7 or 8 years, no raises, nothing like that. It was, and I probably didn't even have any business at the beginning to have that job. So it was really nice, but at some point I realized, like, I need to probably do something that is going to get me and I was probably thinking more just survival and like making a living wage long term for my family and those kinds of things. And so Tip Northwest got started, and then this, I think that probably fed into the SNAP thing, plus great mentors like Sue Franz or whatever. Those kind of relationships worked their way into those opportunities. But I was telling you all earlier tonight that when I got that call about IPI, I mean, I don't even remember. I must have applied for it, right? Like, that's how I got, like, I must have written something.
There was a call. And
put my CV out.
Names on the,
Yep. So I must have done that. So that was naive too, but you just never know. And when I got that call, not only because I was just expecting to be maybe not on the IPI because I wouldn't make the cut, but not only did I get onto IPI, I think I remember reading that email and being like, what in the world is going on? Because it said, yeah, you've been appointed to co-chair. And then your co-chair is Regan A. Gurung.
So if I'm listening to this correctly, Regan, you were named first, and then you had some sway over who your co-lead was going to be. Am I getting that correct?
I think, I'm actually now trying to remember whether I was still on CABE or not, because I think I definitely applied as well, because there was the call, and AP has been very fair with everybody's equal footing. And I think I applied, as you said, you applied. And given my work on intro psych, I think, and being just with having the background of CABE, I think I was in the conversation. And Eric, to address your point, I mean, I think there was definitely one of the hey, do you know this guy? Do you know these potential candidates? And I think in that room or the setting, it was pretty clear that with Garth's work on Snap and you're right. I think Tip Northwest was definitely a feature. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's, let me just take a minute here. It's Snap, it's Tip Northwest, it's co-founding Psych Sessions, it's organizational work on Shared Space for All. I mean, you've got a person here who's got an amazing amount of organizational experience, an up-and-coming person from the community college ranks who's showing great promise. And what a great place to pair this person with someone who's got content expertise in intro psych and cut these two people loose and let them lead this national effort. I mean, it's a really smart move on APA's part, on CABE's part.
Yeah, we were talking, the three of us, earlier tonight about, I think indirectly, how do you take people of a new generation and find those folks who are the next leaders? I think that's the trick, right? To something like even STP, which is growing at a phenomenal rate, really, since both of you were president.
Yep.
Right? It's big.
Yeah.
And you have to continually create some like opportunity for early career psychologists to get involved. We were talking about a couple ECPs from 5 years ago who are now all over the place and doing things, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And, in my home department, we talk all the time about developing a deep bench of talent, whether it's adjunct faculty who can teach for us or the folks who can do all kinds of things for us. We need this in terms of our national leaders in STP or Psychi or Psi Beta or whatever organization. We always need to be developing a deep bench of talented leaders. So I want to come back to, CABE and APA collaborate. They've got their two co-leads for IPI. We know there's going to be 4 subgroups, I would imagine. That was already predetermined.
Actually, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was, that came out of the first steering committee meeting. So the next step was to bring together 8 more people, because I think the idea was a group of 10 and 8 more people. And here was
I think the 10 was appointed at the same time, and we were 2 of those 10.
Right. We were 2 of the 10, and the big challenge was we want to make sure we have community college representation, high school representation, a good blend of geography. Because APA, whenever APA does stuff, it's always looking at all those variables.
So why 10? That wasn't a predetermined 2 leaders plus 2.
No, because we had
steering
no idea
leaders.
what this thing would be.
Huh?
We had no idea what
Look
it
at
would
you.
be. Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to name it.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I'm going to name the 2-year folks if I can off the top of my head. Oh, this is dangerous. Okay. So it was, I think, okay, here we go. It was Bill Altman's 4-year. Nope, Bill Altman's 2-year. Bill Altman and Robin Musselman and Jerry Redman and Catherine Wicks. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so those were my 2-year folks. And anyway, what's your recollection of how what we did with those?
I think I have it. I think I have it. There was a previous version of what this committee was called before it was APA IPI, and a name and moniker that Eric much maligned for mostly good reason was, you may remember it now, the compass points.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yes. And the reason that brings me to the groups is it was originally going to be called GPS, right?
Yeah.
4 compass points.
That.
Remember, Garth, the north,
yes,
finding north?
Yeah.
Right, Garth, that was
True
Garth's
north.
charge, was true north. And the 4
Still
compass
using
points.
that metaphor in talks.
Yes, 4 compass points, 4 groups. So yes.
Oh my gosh, I ruined so many things, don't I? The compass points. That would not be the only thing I ruined at IPI.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Yeah.
We won't get into it.
Yeah, we won't.
We're not going to get into the famous point in the APA presentation.
No, we won't get into that. We're not getting into pillars. We're not getting into anything.
Oh, I'm bringing up pillars.
Oh,
I'm bringing up pillars.
We don't need those oldest, but
I will.
The APA boardroom was quite big. Fine.
Okay, wait, let's get to that in order. All right,
But-
so you got your 10.
So yes, so the 10, and I think it was
compass points.
4 compass points.
Oh,
Did the 10 come together in person before we
Yes,
brought in the... Yes. Okay. Before we brought in the 22.
Yes.
And that's where we picked our
Yep.
dream teams,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Now, this is interesting. We just had a conversation before we turned this on. And this is interesting because how do you pick
Mm-hmm.
10
there
more
was an
people?
open call, right? People had to apply.
No,
to be
for the
on it?
first 10. And then after that, it was selected
It was
for...
Yep.
Who are the people who are going to round out these teams in a way that these teams need to be
Are
rounded
you
out?
sure? I didn't apply. I didn't have to
You may
submit.
have, but at that point it was not
Well,
through the application
I think
process.
I think it became after the 10, it became, because so first off, even for that 10, there were some really good people who made it to the next, the 20, the
next 12.
The next 12 that didn't make it to the first 10 because of the classic, we need this,
Right.
this demographic, that, this, and the other.
Yeah.
So there were some clear-cut must be on, but not necessarily on that first because of that whole, let's make sure we're getting good representation, which is great. Then there was a very large set of people, who were, it's intro psych. These people have to be on because of the work they do with intro psych. And then there were other possibilities of, whose expertise would flesh things out.
There wasn't a nomination process for the remaining 12?
No.
Because I could have swore I nominated a couple people
No.
and they didn't get on. Maybe I nominated people for the 10.
Maybe.
Or the 8, I guess.
For the steering committee. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know I nominated 2 people for the steering committee.
Yeah, because there was steering committee, and then that the rest happened. I can remember all the boards around the room and at the APA building where we
in the presidential room on the
no,
third
it wasn't.
floor?
It wasn't there actually. It wasn't there.
Okay.
It was third floor.
Yeah.
So that's how it grew into the
22.
Yeah, and I can't believe
groups of 5 and
they
2.
pulled that off. Was that back? That was Jim Diaz still, right? Then?
Yes. Yep.
That was before
Kathy
Kathy Gruss.
Before Jim's promotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the timeline of that? Can you give the rough timeline to the listeners?
December was the number of 70.
17?
I think was the time the steering committee met in DC.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, then that summer was the July summer when we all got together as a working group.
Wow, you were busy because Psych Session starts in October of 7.
Just prior to that.
Yeah, you were super busy.
So it was December 17th.
In fact, you brought out my group for its own meeting before
That's
the
right.
entire.
That is right. The assessment, SLOs and assessment.
We talked you into bringing
because y'all were so, SLOs, backward design. You start with the SLOs.
Well, and then you had an additional one after that.
So then there was the whole group.
Then we only had one by ourselves.
That's right. Now was that December?
No. The whole group came out first.
No, I meant the SLO.
They
when
came
did
out
come out
after.
I think January or
everybody came out.
February.
Okay, yeah.
We came out for a weekend, and
Man,
you guys
went
were
to
there
DC
too.
a lot of times.
Yeah, those were good days.
Those were the before time.
Pre-pandemic.
The before
Yeah.
times, absolutely.
Who knows what's going to happen now?
But yeah, so it was steering committee meeting, met the SLOs and assessment team came out in early 2018. There was a IPI summit of all 22 members that same summer, later that summer, and then there was no other face-to-face meeting.
No.
So at this point, so I just for our listeners, I'm on one of the groups, so I'm one of the 22, but you two are the co-leaders for this. Just pretend it's just the 3 of us and no one's listening to this, all right? To what extent were things predetermined? Meaning, did the 2 of you have a vision for how it was going to turn out, or did you have any hints? Like, did APA staffers or folks tell you, here's what we're really aiming for, help this group of 22 get to X point? or it needs to look like this. It needs to look like quality principles, or when we're done, it needs to look like national standards for high school. I mean, what was that process?
Yeah, my sense is this was very much trusting the expertise of the people invited to be here.
No, that's a mistake right there.
Well, I mean, to some extent, when you say
who's like me, are you kidding?
Well, things like that are difficult, but I think there were the times when I know, oftentimes with the different groups where Garth and I did a lot more of the sharing between. I mean, I can remember some of those early phone conversations where people just wanted to know what other groups are doing, But to answer your question, I think trust the assessment experts to come up with SLOs. It wasn't have 5 or have 10 or something like that. And a more direct answer to your question as well is APA was also very, very trust the experts, see what comes out. And I think that's why, if you remember, especially the steering committee, it was originally supposed to be a year, and it became quickly evident that that would not be feasible. And I still remember the surprise that many of the steering committee and later the full group experienced and voiced when we shared that we were really looking at a 3-year process with a big, APA culminating in an APA meeting day institute on intro psych. And I think most people at that time were used to shorter gigs and thinking, all right, we do this for a year and get, and get this stuff done. And the 3-year was a definite surprise.
Yeah, I think we realized we were working on the back of all of those meetings that had gone on the previous 15 years, starting with Puget Sound and that recommendation that, hey, all of this, but we think intro psych needs to be looked at. And then the work that Regan, you were involved in with strengthening of the intro course. And so all that had happened, but we'd never been funded just to look like specifically at this course and to take the time to do it. And then, as it should have been, it's that big a course that it needed multiple years to bring these people together to actually come up with something. We didn't know it would be a book when we started. We didn't know that it would be recommendations. We had a blank slate. It was actually a really beautiful, kind of opportunity.
Organic kind of.
Yep.
See what comes out, see what needs to be done. Yeah.
I remember us, Regan, getting into, first of all, managing those 4 groups was crazy. But
sorry,
we didn't even manage. That's not the right word, because it's not like we were coordinating. Yeah, for sure. But I remember us going into those meetings, or getting reports from those groups, and then APA always had an empty office. It's like a maze there, but APA always had one empty office, and so we would like set up camp there, and then we would be writing things and just talking through, where does this go from here? Regan had a lot of experience with, I think Snap was very helpful, to coordinating this process. And those were fun conversations, because who knows where ideas come from? Who knows where those ideas come from I don't know what those pivotal times were where we decided this is a book, or these are outcomes, or I remember this moment you came up with this idea of basically curation is it's going to be some evidence-based things, but it's going to be really our job is going to be curating what's out there, not necessarily coming up with something. And then we ended up doing what we called the census, which wasn't a true census.
And I think that was the big drive for data, right? Because that's the biggest issues with intro psych is there wasn't.
Ladies and gentlemen, Regan Gurung. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I think but something else here is in Eric, a part of the answer to your question, because of the 2014 report that had 5 recommendations for intro psych, at least 3 of those 5 recommendations made its way into 3 of the 4 groups. So the teacher training, that was something really underlined in that 2014 document, the need to focus on training instructors of intro psych. That's why that made its own group. The student success, that was part of that, that came out of that as well. So even though we had this flexibility to go whichever direction the group deemed fitting, I think there was that good guidance from the stuff that both came before and that those groups before didn't manage to do. That was clearly acknowledged by the two big groups that did it before. That really set the ground. It was, here's what needs to be done that couldn't have been finished before, but now we've got these 3 years to do it.
Eric, I know I'm cutting in on you, but what's really interesting is when this group of folks took shape into 4 subgroups. When I think about those 4 subgroups, those really came out of the efforts of individuals within those groups. Teacher training really was Missy Beers. I mean, you almost saw what she was doing. You thought, yeah, well, that's got to be done. And transformation really came out of Steve Chu, like looking at what he had done and thinking, well, that needs to be looked at. And I don't know, we need to formalize that for intro psych. Course design was just one that had to be tackled. Yeah. Because there was a bunch of stuff out there for course design. We'd all seen, Bridget has this amazing talk on themes. Sue and I had been doing interteaching for a long time. Other people had been doing that, and other people with different strategies. And so how do we make sense of this? And then obviously the big one was the course outcomes. Yeah. What are we going to recommend and how are we going to do this? And what you all did, Eric, was unbelievably strategic, where you came up with course outcomes that were content agnostic. And yeah, that's amazing. It still is amazing. And it does so many important things for instructors of intro psych, like let them off the hook for content. Yeah. Well, and
I think while also acknowledging that it now makes teacher training even more important, because how do you do that, right? Content's easy. Here are the 16 chapters, right? Pick, but the skill stuff, the themes, right? And I think that's what sort of makes it exciting for many of us is, wow, all right, this gauntlet has been thrown down. Here is what intro psych should look like.
While we're on the record.
Are you going to make us grovel again for our mistakes?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right, go ahead.
It might be more of the reverse, quite honestly.
Okay.
Let's talk about pillars. Where do pillars come from, and how do they fit in introductory psychology?
So pillars came out of the 2014 task force with the simple goal of providing a framework and structure for the instructor to select content so that they didn't feel like they had to cover the entire book.
Eric, it's a metaphor. So metaphors are sometimes helpful for folks to understand things that are quite complicated, but then you get a metaphor and you're like, oh, I get what that's all about. So
sorry, Garth, why did you feel the need to explain metaphor to me?
I don't know. How do you feel
Did you think I was going somewhere with that question?
Maybe.
I was just asking about the source of the pillars model.
Yeah. This feels like a gotcha interview now.
Yeah, it does. It's like, no, let's have
So no, I was just, I'm glad
No,
2014 group made up stuff and it got carried forward.
That's right. Okay, so I finally understood in the last few months that your problem with this is it's
stupid?
No, it's a validity problem. It's like, is this actually meaningful? Like, on what basis do we have this metaphor of pillars? And I will say, and you can correct me if I was wrong on any of that, but I will say this. Regan and I have literally toured the country and talked to professors of psychology, high school teachers, and this is a gift to them to be able to look at something so simple and say, oh, because in the end, most of us have imposter phenomenon, and we get handed a 700-page textbook with 16 chapters in it, and we don't know how to tackle it because we weren't trained in teaching. And we get this model that says, you are doing fine if you pick content from these 5 domains: cognitive, biological, developmental, health and stress. Missing one. Anyway.
Probably learning.
No, it's under developmental.
Yeah.
Well, it's clearly a very effective model. It's helping you heuristically, but go ahead.
Well, but there's also you mentioned some keywords there, right? Domains. So it's not that it completely came out of nowhere. The national standards have domains. And even in the language of 1.0 and 2.0, there were these demarcations of the field. Now, I think it would be a wonderful psych sessions to get together and say, how would you carve up psychology, and how would you carve it up circa 1900 versus circa 2? I mean, that's a super great, that would be a super conversation.
I'll just say these 2 things about it, and then I'll let it go. First off, we have had conversations with folks around the country from time to time who wondered why certain topics ended in certain buckets. What's the empirical basis for the groupings and how they got there? And secondly, you can make a 5-column table without drawing pillars and without putting on a fake roof and a fake foundation that's made up. You can communicate that message without having a metaphor.
It's not as memorable to students.
A foundation,
it's clearly not memorable to you.
A foundation of research methods, a capstone integration experience. Makes sort of sense.
A capstone experience in intro. What do you do in your intro class, Dr.
Well,
Gurung?
actually, we actually do a lot of specific integrating of topics. There we have a capstone, what we call the visionary paper. Since you asked, we have a visionary paper where people actually have to integrate the different topics together.
And I think that's great for a Brewer Award winner. Now give us some things for the rest of the country and the entire distribution of intro psych teachers.
I think, Garth, you too. We've run into a lot of people doing really innovative things with integration. I think that is exactly one of the needs, is to get more of that sharing out there. So how do you integrate? What do you do? And I think we need to get more of that out there. So you're absolutely right there, that it's not, some folks are doing it more than others, but that's a challenge that I think is exactly in play right now.
All right. Thank you for doing your best to answer my questions. All right.
And then, Eric, let's just be honest, and I love the woolly mammoths. I do. I mean, I adore...
I think there's a big but coming.
Well, we can say and instead of but.
Oh, yes, and?
And you all were difficult, and I say that with a lot of love, and they all know that I love them, and it's, who it is. It is Kristen Whitlock, Jennifer Thompson, you, Jane Hallinan, Sue Franz. Yeah, a few big personalities there who had to undertake outcomes and assessment for intro psych. And guess what? You all were difficult, and it created a great product in the end.
Well, First off, who put that group together? Not me.
Yeah, Jen and Kristen, and I'm sure they regretted it.
Yeah. And secondly, we did such a good job that there's no mention of our work on the cover of the book. But who's bitter? All right, let's move along.
All right.
Yeah. I think we dealt with that too, right?
Yeah,
it's part of course design, right? The
we
SLOs,
dealt with that. That was APA. We had a different title, and APA came back with one to us, and
everything's part of course design, if you want to call it that.
And that's exactly it. Yeah.
So why not just call it course design, the APA way?
Well,
because you got to call it something sexy like transforming intro psych.
All right, let's moving right along. So I know I've kept you gentlemen probably far too long. If you look back on the experience, what, if anything, would you change? And I know it's not really quite done. I mean, there's still got to be rollout, but the bulk of it's done. I think you would probably agree. But I know you both well enough to know that I think you appreciate the experience, you appreciate the opportunities. I know you appreciate the people, both at APA and your collaborators. But, you've now had this experience. Would you have structured it differently? Would you have had different timelines? What, given the pandemic, what might you have done differently in a positive frame?
Regan, I would also just tag on to that. What would you have done differently? Because this is your area. What would you have done differently from a research perspective?
Well, and actually that's exactly where I was going to go, which is get more research sooner, because a lot of the research was happening simultaneously, and it would have been nice to have even more time to get more of that research done. Yeah, I mean, with all that research, some of that research is still just making its way through. I would love to build in iterations, right, where you take some stuff, pilot test it in the field, in classrooms, and have an opportunity to come back and do some more. Now, you can argue that, and I will argue that that's what's going on right now, where this is not the end. Just like guidelines 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0, I think the team managed to do something that was never done before. But it's not over, right? And that's part of the process where now I know people are testing it and trying it. And Eric, like you mentioned earlier, I know people are trying to come up with ways to put those into action. I mean, this summer, APA is hosting an IPI workshop to actually, how can we do some more integration? How can we teach the themes, right? So in that sense, I don't think it's an ongoing process. The only thing I would say is I wish there had been more data available for us to work with. I think we did a good job trying to come up with stuff, but and got some good data, but there's just so much more empirical stuff we need to know about. And I'll tie it to the Many Classes project, right? You may have heard about the Many Classes project, just like the many labs, the replications and the many labs and the whole list of the many, insert word here. But it's just now that the Many Classes project is running, where it's a mechanism to test things in many classes. And I think we didn't have that mechanism, and we sort of put something together that approximated it, but that just made our job way harder.
But to have data like you're talking about, you would have had to have had a direction faster sooner. Don't you think it would have taken longer? Because it takes, the national stuff you're doing, the national census data, Census 1 and Census 2, those were long data collection, data analysis efforts.
Yeah.
So you would have needed a firmer direction sooner, and it would have taken longer to collect, analyze, reflect on the data.
It would have,
and have it inform what you were doing.
Right, and that's why the product, the book that has a 2022 pub date, nicely is based on the data we did collect from the census. But that census data itself took us a long time to collect. So, I think, interestingly enough, I love all the stuff we did, and I don't think you can downplay, or I don't think you can say enough about the emergent properties that of having a group like this together, which is just one of the most satisfying experiences, to take a look at how 22 people came together with all their years of previous experience and expertise. And now you have to put, and many of these individuals, many of us, so used to doing things by ourselves and getting to do things the way we wanted to as an individual. And here the charge was come together and make some compromises. And I think there was a lot of that have to happen.
That's hard.
And that is hard. And, that's why hats off to all 20 individuals that worked with Garth and myself, because, those times Garth alluded to when he and I would go find an empty office and chat and go, okay, here's what this group's doing, maybe, and how we had to have those conversations simultaneously to the groups having theirs, and then go back and wow, those were fun times.
And we had high school standards were there at the same time, and they were trying to figure out what to do.
3 floors above us or 2 floors
Yes,
above us.
they were meeting at the same time while we were trying to sort out, or while your group, Eric, was trying to sort out outcomes. And there was a magical moment when we went down to report on what your group was doing, Eric, or we went up or down or whatever.
Down,
Down to the high school standards group. And when we saw what they had come up with, it was extremely similar to what we had come up with. And so that was some amount of reliability that we thought, well, we might be on the same track, maybe not statistical, but at least conceptual reliability that this was a good way to go. Regan, we are about to, as you kind of discussed, this summer, we will be doing some workshops, training through APA with regards to the book and the recommendations. What kind of data should we be? Is there anything collectively? Have you been thinking about? Because I know you're doing the HIPPR thing, and you've got the
SIP.
the hub for intro psych.
Hoping to have another SIP.
SIP is
Summer intro psych planning.
Yep.
It's
So, what kind of are you thinking about any research questions with regards to IPI?
Well, I think the big one is I'm really hoping to see what folks have been doing with the IPI recommendations over the last year, right? I mean, so this is this great, essentially a year later, because a lot of the SLOs were put out on the website last summer. I mean, some summers ago. So we've had some time to do work with it, and this summer is going to be a great time to see, all right, what have people come up with? What sort of activities, what sort of assignments, what sort of teaching instructional methods have you come up with to tackle these things? So that's the kind, it's not data per se, but that's the kind of, it's going to be great to see.
Well, and I would just say, and you both already know this, give yourself a chance that with the pandemic, I would imagine implementation is going to be slower and more frustratingly slower than you would expect.
Well, and not just that, it's difficult. I mean, Garth and I, we are probably the 2 individuals who knew what was coming from the IPI earlier than anybody, right? Because we knew what every group was doing. We were trying to think ahead, and both of us teach intro psych. And we've, we had a chat the beginning of last summer expressing our own excitement yet fear of the challenge of how to do this. These themes, great. What does it look like? And I spent all of last summer as part of the SIP trying to completely rework my assignments to do a better job of tapping into the themes.
Yeah, I think a lot of intro psych instructors can't do that or are afraid to do that, so they take it one step at a time. Yeah. They don't rework the entire course, but they might rework one section of the course or one component of the course.
You were kind of jabbing a while ago about this fact that we didn't put outcomes and assessment into the title of the book. And I know.
It's still not there.
And that's maybe second edition. But there was also this reality that the third outcome, which is psychology's integrative themes, is kind of the crown jewel of this book. Is probably the thing that will be the greatest gift to the intro psych course and to teaching and to remember it for students' long-term kind of retention.
That's a very kind compliment. The only reason the title rubs a little bit the wrong way to our group mates is because all 3 other groups are explicitly named in the title of the book.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, that was...
I know you guys tried to...
That was our gift to you, Eric, and to that group. So...
Is that like the Princess and the Pea? That's the pea that you gave?
Yeah.
That's the gift you gave?
Anyway, let me finish this thought, because what I realized, though, at some point, because you talk about this book, it's evidence-informed, evidence-based. It's curated. It's best practice for intro psych. And yet there are some things that, like, once you start working them out into your classroom, all these recommendations, you need a community of practice. You need support. You need people to run ideas off of. I remember, Regan, you and I kind of talking about, like, we're the co-chairs of IPI, and we were struggling with, how are we going to put, like, almost ashamedly, like, all right, Regan, what are you doing right now for this? I mean, for implementing these things. And one of the things that I realized is that as I was having students kind of passively, at the beginning, I was kind of just passively introducing them to these themes, wanted to see what they were doing with them, collecting a little data and feedback from them about, like, what do you think on their face? How are these? Do they make sense to you? I was doing it as a final assessment, low stakes, whatever, and they didn't get them. They didn't get the themes. And so I realized these need to be a little bit more explicit. Well, that eventually led me to creating a video series on integrative themes, because I realized not only do students not get these on their face, but I was talking to colleagues and I said, well, what do you think about individual differences? What do you think this theme means? And I got 3 different answers from 3 different people. So I went back to this, to Eric's crew there. I went back to Kristen and Jen in particular, and I said, what were you guys thinking when you came up with, it was the 2 of them. It was the social justice outcome, or the theme, and it was the individual differences theme. And it was super helpful for me to hear that from them. And then I could put this out to my students and even broader. So some of those things you can't predict are going to happen or not happen or be difficult or easy until they get into the classroom.
Well, and I think this is kind of to Regan's point. I mean, I don't know of any good, reliable data that says that teaching your course around a theme leads to better student outcomes on any measure. Now, if you know about that data, you should give us the citations. I know Bridget Martin Hard's been doing this for a while. Wayne Whiten's been doing it for longer than a while. And if we had a magic bullet panacea, we'd all be doing it. I think it's worthy of trying to do it. And it might not mean that you get better retention, but you might get better course satisfaction and equal retention. Regan and I know from studies that we've done that 2 years later, there's not much retention of intro psych material in the traditional ways people teach it. So I hope that people will have a hypothesizing spirit about making changes to their intro psych course, no matter what changes they make, evidence-informed, evidence-based, and test these ideas out, and then publish them, report them at conferences, go to ACT, come to the teaching conferences at regionals.
I know you're trying to wrap up, but it does bring up a question for me, and that is because you both do so much research at SOTL. So, okay. So I believe, and I'd have to look at the literature, but I do believe that a more coherent understanding themes. I think we can think about what is it the method of loci, that there are certain memory techniques that do help people remember better, and maybe something like themes, it does have this foundation in the literature of being helpful to memory. Now, if that hasn't been explicitly tested with intro psych, where does that put it? Does it make it evidence informed? Does it make it like perspective? I don't know what the word is. What does that make it?
Well, I mean, for me, I have a 3-part, I think something is either, and a lot of this is from implementation science and, Rachel Soicher's work on implementation science, loved that the distinction that's basically there's something that's efficacious shown in the lab, there's something that's effective shown in the classroom, and everything else just has promise. And so I think, like you said, Eric, this approach, teaching using themes, has promise, but it's got to be tested, either in the lab or in the classroom, but it's got promise, And I think it goes beyond even just a way of helping people remember stuff. I think it's what you said, that course, not just the course satisfaction, but I think it increases motivation. I think it increases, I believe it should make any person taking the class want to keep learning it, know it, and use it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that everything has to lead to enhanced learning outcomes, meaning it's got to, if your average teaching it one way was 79%, the new way of teaching it with themes has to be 83% or higher. I mean, that would be nice, but I think there are other dependent variables we can be interested in. Course satisfaction, interest in taking another course. Yep. I've been saying for years we ought to be interested in what do we teach early on in an intro psych course that, let's say a student's going to drop in week 6. Can we give them the most important stuff in the first 5 weeks? So even if they drop the course, they can take something away that's positive. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of people thinking about that. I do know we're trying to wrap up. So I have 2 last questions or topics for both of you. One is, are you glad that you participated in IPI? Are you glad that you did what you did?
Well, for me, it was a huge boost, I think, professionally. I think Regan will have maybe a different answer along that front because I had already done a leadership position at Snap and other things kind of going on, but we're at different stages of our careers as well. So for me, that was a gift, and I can't imagine anything better than working with those 21 people. That was just a gift. And we don't get paid to make these kinds of contributions. I guess it's maybe under service for our jobs or something like that. But to be honest, my institution doesn't care if I'm doing service for the American Psychological Association. That service to the college is what they're looking for. And so I have no regrets. It was all fun. It was all a gift. And then it continues to work itself out over time. So Regan.
I mean, all I have to add is I feel like it was a privilege to be invited to the table. It was a privilege to be with this group of people. And for years, I mean, my very first class that I taught way back in my first job was intro psych. And I've always loved intro psych, and I think about intro psych a lot, and I do research on intro psych. I mean, I love intro psych, and the chance to be at this table and making a difference in intro psych, wow. Now,
a chance to co-lead the table, by the way, not just to be at the table, but to co-lead it.
Yeah, for absolutely.
Here's my last thing I want to chat about. 4,200 colleges and universities in the U.S., maybe 1,700 departments of psychology. Intro psych is ubiquitous and it's everywhere too. Why are we all designing separate courses at our separate institutions? Why isn't there a universal intro psych bank of lectures and overhead transparencies and PowerPoints that we all agree are the core of psychology, and we can all go pull from that central repository that's been curated, and then we all customize? Why are we all inventing our own thing and spending all that time and resource? Why not have the best instructional design professionals on the face of the planet invest in that thing that, $1.2 to $1.6 million is spent on every year? Why are we all doing it separately when we don't have the expertise? How come we can't collaborate on that?
Well, the big sticking point is if you use different books, using a common benchmark is different. And I think that's what I love about the SLOs is that it is textbook agnostic. So I think for the first time, there's the ability to do that. Whereas previously, every course varies so much based on the textbook adopted.
Dr. Gurung, but you know from your own research and publications that you can let students pick any darn textbook they want to.
Some of the stuff we've got together. Yes.
And you actually used, I'm pretty sure, a common set of PowerPoints for all students, regardless of the book they chose. So the book doesn't matter. In fact, I don't I think in that study, you had one book where students performed worse. But other than that, the book typically doesn't matter in student performance.
And I think here's where we go back to you and me and Garth are confident about that and know that when you mention those 1,700, there are a lot of folks either not knowledgeable about that, not willing to take the chance.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be a leg up to give them professionally designed slides with the core materials without errors and mistakes and give it away for free and give them professionally designed from instructional designers?
Yep.
And with the APA imprimatur and the seal of approval from AP. I mean, I just don't understand why we don't share this. I mean, if you want to have OER at its purest, that's what we would do, right? Or am I misguided here?
Is this, are you advocating, and I know you have been, but is this your opinion that if APA ever put out a book based on IPI, that it may be the book?
Oh, not really. I mean, by the way, APA has published intro psych textbooks in the 1970s. APA had a published intro psych, so that's not unheard of. That's a whole different conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand why we don't share materials and why that an instructor couldn't start with this core. Why couldn't we give any instructor in the country who wanted it a core course, a Canvas shell, a Blackboard shell, a Moodle shell, and then let them customize it as opposed to the drudgery or the delight, I suppose, of designing their course from scratch and typing in their own definition of dependent and independent variable for the second lecture of the course and positive and negative reinforcement and typing it in themselves into PowerPoint. Why don't we share?
Yeah, and I would say some of that sharing is going on. It's not as widespread as it should be and could be. So,
do you have examples of where that sharing is going on?
I mean, some of it is in topics on STP. There's a lot on that website. There's a lot.
Yeah, but they're sharing articles about topics. I don't think they're sharing PowerPoint slides. The last time I looked, but it's been a while. I'll admit that. Anyway,
well, Regan, is anything that you're doing right now conducive to this kind of sharing?
Well, last summer's SIP project, there was a lot of sharing of assignments and things like that. And actually, I remember back to Tip Northwest, there were so many offers of people willing to share.
Yeah.
It wasn't at the level of slides though, Eric. You're right. In terms of slides and things like that, lots of assignment sharing offers. But yeah, it's not at the level of here are some great slides.
Well, I'll tell you.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I just gave a talk at MPA, and one of the points I made was I was once at a conference. I don't remember where it was. It was years ago, and somebody couldn't make it to their talk, and somebody else gave their talk from their slides, and it was the worst thing I've ever seen. And I think this is part of the problem, because ideally we want the intro psych instructor to give the course that only they can give, ideally, and that it would be a strong course and a meaningful course and a helpful course to students and a memorable course. And yet that is just unlikely that it's going to be all those things, because early career folks, even mid-career folks like myself, it's a long road to become an efficient teacher.
But imagine that brand new grad student. Imagine that brand new adjunct faculty member. Imagine that associate professor who's never taught intro psych. A professionally curated set of materials would be better than starting from scratch. And this is essentially what you might get with an instructor's manual and with the adoption of certain textbooks. I'm just saying, why not make it freely available to everyone and make it book agnostic? And again, the pushback I'm getting from the two of you makes me think it's a bad idea, which it could very well be a bad idea.
I don't think you're getting pushback. I think you're just getting...
No, it's okay. Yeah. I have bad ideas. It's all right. I don't have any problem with that.
Well, I'm actually just wondering how it's different than a instructor resource, and you're saying it's not. It would just not be. It would be free, especially if APA is working on this and if we're actually trying to make a change nationally in the way that people approach
It
IntroPsych.
wouldn't even have to be APA. I mean, it could be PsyChi, it could be STP, it could be Psych Sessions, it could be HIPPR, it could be a number of organizations that get together. I don't know. Maybe it's late and I'm just...
Well, we all know that that one of the major problems, and I know that we actually love publishers, and I personally think that they try to do a great job for our colleagues and for us in what they're trying to produce. But one of the problems is that we are the IPI recommendations are multiple steps ahead of the traditional textbook, which is locked into certain content that is basically irrelevant, not helpful.
It may not even be that consistent.
Yep, and inconsistent across textbooks, right? And so you know, I think Sue Franz gives a great talk on why that happens, and it's because some of us do reviews on those books and we say, well, gosh, you know, this or that theory needs to be in this textbook. Why? Because I teach that.
Well, in another podcast someday, Regan and I will talk about the power of reviewers, and then I have a story about Scott Lilienfeld, may he rest in peace, about he told a story once at a conference about when he tried to take dark adaptation out of his sensation and perception chapter, and reviewers revolted at that, a handful, and he couldn't even take that topic out. And he told that story very passionately. So reviewers have a lot of power, just like reviewer number 2 for journal articles. Yeah. Gentlemen, I know it's late. I appreciate it. I'll give you both the last word. Anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners about IPI?
I think there's some great ways to make the course better in there. Be open to experimenting and trying new things, and to reaching out to other people doing the same stuff. And there are more of those venues coming down the pike. So keep your eyes open for them, because they're coming.
And I would add that the authors of the Transforming Intro Psych book, I always tell my students that when they see an article or when I talk about an author or researcher, if they get really interested in that, they should always just email them and see if those people respond. Often they do. And for instructors who are reading that Transforming Intro Psych book, we have these 22 folks are pretty unbelievable people. And so if you are looking for some individual kind of mentorship, or just you have questions, that those people are really good resources. And then I would say just watch for what APA is doing, because they are, Sue Orsillo, Martha Abeno, those folks are still putting tons of effort. They're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of their support of Intro Psych and follow up with the Intro Psych initiative.
More stuff coming.
Yep. And so it's happening beginning this summer again.
And I'll put this in the show notes, but I think you probably both know the website off the top of your head,
www.apa.org/IPI.
IPI. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.